So my name is Rich Pulice. I'm a professor at the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York, and professor at Regis College in outside Boston, Massachusetts. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I was lucky enough to be one of the people who helped start the first Xperts conference several years ago, and it is wonderful to see it to be such a success today. And I'm certainly glad to be back here. As I was telling Peter, who's driving me in today, I've been coming to the Netherlands for over 20 years, and I've only missed, I think, 2 years in 20. So I'm very glad to be back here in the Netherlands and Belgium, and it is wonderful to be with you all. So I turned 65 this year. This past August, and in the United States that makes me officially old. I'm now on Medicare. And also I was married 40 years this year to my beautiful wife who's out there somewhere in the dark. And it was also another anniversary. It was the 20th anniversary of something that changed my life forever. And that thing that changed my life was mental illness. In 1995, I was diagnosed with a major depression. Spent several days, 80 or so, over the next couple of years in psychiatric hospitals and in psychiatric treatment. And I am glad to say that I was one of the lucky people who recovered pretty quickly, probably 5-6 years, and my depression was gone. And I am happy to say that today I do not need medication or anything that goes with that. But that changed my life. That 1995, the same way marrying my wife 40 years ago and being born 65 years ago, that 20 years ago changed my life. Before that time, I was a professor, as I am now, but I really didn't get what it was to be all about to be a person with a mental illness. And it was a shock. It was a shock from the perspective of how people get treated, the different things that happen to individuals during the course of their life, what people do without, the stigma of mental illness, and all the things that go with that I really could never have understood until I experienced that. Over this 20-year period, since 1995, I've made some friends with individuals who also have suffered from a mental illness, and we have created, I have a bond, I think, that is unique to people who've gone through the experience. By the way, I don't recommend it to anybody. It wasn't like you want to go out and get a mental illness tomorrow. But in fact, it changes you. And I think it changes you in a positive way. At least for me, it did. Over that 20-year period, I started out by not being able to talk about my mental illness. And so for the first couple of years, I said nothing about it. I hid it. And it was actually here in the Netherlands, it was in the Netherlands in about 2003 that I first started to talk about it at one of the psychiatric conferences. And I realized how important it was for me, not just for the people listening to me, but especially for me, to talk about the experience that I had. And so in the beginning of my process, it was about me talking about my mental illness. And notice I say my, it's like I owned it. It's like it belonged to me. And it really was a very big part of me. But one of the things I realized is I didn't need to be the person telling the story because there were so many of my colleagues out there who could tell the story so much better than I did. And some of them you're meeting at this conference, and some of them you may meet at later times. But I did see that those individuals had the experience and were able to go out there and speak positively about their experience and to talk about what it means and what it means to have support in your life. So what have I seen over the last now 20 years? Well, for me, what was very important to me was the support of my family. At the time I developed depression, my daughter Bridget, who's now 30, was 10 years old. My daughter Elizabeth, a few years older than her. And of course my wife Maureen. But all of the people in my family were there to support me, and that was so important to me. In addition to that, I think it's important for us to see about getting supported by members of members of the community, and that's some of the things that I've seen develop when it comes to recovery from a mental illness in the United States and here in Europe as well. That community support. So for me, family and community. And so as my experience went on, I no longer had to be the guy who's out there saying, I had a mental illness, listen to my story, but I was able to support the stories of other individuals out there, and I hope help them. And so I've been involved sort of at the edges of the peer support movement, being a professional, at the same time being a consumer, a peer. And as I think back about it, the strength I get is from the people in the peer movement, the people who have gone out there and been able to survive and be resilient, to be tough, be strong about their recovery, and to make something of their lives well beyond what society has always expected of them. And they've done such a good job at doing that. I've also been very lucky to be able to expand my own experience into other countries. Thanks to Rokas Lupik and Harry Grass, I was able to connect to people in Romania. And in Romania, I saw and continue to see individuals who suffered the oppression of communism, but along with that, suffered the oppression of the stigma of mental illness. And we see those individuals out there. Again, it's amazing to see the peer movement developing in Romania, and how especially young people can get out there and talk about their disability, talk about their abilities, and how those abilities work to make them better people and better members of society. Over the last 5 years, I've also had the privilege of working in Africa, in a country called Uganda. Some of you may have visited there, so I'd certainly be familiar with it. And there, the quest is just starting. But there's some similarities that I'm seeing that are also mirror what happened in the peer movement in the United States, mirrors what happened in Romania and the Czech Republic and some of the other places that I've been. And that is the development of the support systems that people need. Some of you may be aware that there are literally millions of people in Africa who suffer from depression. I was privileged to work with a group called Strong Minds in Uganda. And Strong Minds deals with the treatment of women who have who suffer from depression. And one of the things I've seen in Africa is the same kinds of things I saw in Romania, the same kinds of things I saw in the United States and some of the other places that I worked, and that is that connection to family, that connection to community. In addition to that, the things that we're seeing is, that I've been able to see, is people being able to connect to jobs and what we're now talking about, sustainability. And I want to tell you about one project that a group of people that I'm working with in Uganda. It's a group called Heart Sounds. So Strong Minds was the group that deals with people with depression. Heart Sounds is a group that deals with, is the peer movement in Uganda. And with Heart Sounds, they have something called a recovery college, which some of you may be familiar with, where they're able to go and work, people are able to go and work on their recovery. But in addition to that, we were able to start a sustainable jewelry business. Now, some of you may be aware that in places like Uganda, a US dollar or a euro is a lot of money. And this group, Heart Sounds, was able to put together with some help from me and some other individuals, a jewelry business. And to become sustainable on their own, to support themselves, and to do some really good things for each other, to support their own recovery. This year, we sent over $5,000 back to Uganda as we sold the jewelry for the people from Heart Sounds. But it's not about the money. It certainly helps them. But it's really about the kind of support that they are giving to each other. And again, family and the community. They have created a community in Uganda the same way they did in Romania, the same way we did in the United States, and a community of peers that care about each other every day, that are out there to support each other, to visit each other when, unfortunately, they land in the hospital in Uganda, which is not a pretty place, to get out there and work and be there for people who are not able to support, not able to survive in the community. They get out there and help each other. And it really is such a beautiful thing to see. I love the people in Uganda, and I love the things that they do. So where does this take me? Where does this take you? When we think about recovery, we can talk about anti-stigma all we want to talk about it, and it's a good thing. We can talk about all the sort of more traditional ways that people think about recovery. But for me, 20 years later, on this 20th anniversary of my recovery, and I'm really happy to know that it really did that for me. You know, I sort of digress for a second. You know, good things come from bad things, and this is really one of those cases. If somebody had said to me 21 years ago, you're going to develop a mental illness, is going to make you a better person, I would have said, you're crazy. That will never happen. But it did. So as I wrap up my time with you and the things that we think about, I really want to encourage you to reach beyond that notion of stigma, reach beyond that notion of we're just going to treat those folks with a mental illness better than we did before, and think more about providing the support to your family members who may have a mental illness, to the community members you may know that have a mental illness, and certainly to be aware that this is about making people's lives better. I was the lucky one. I was the really lucky one. I had my family with me, and to this day I will always, always thank people like my sister-in-law who took me in when I needed to be safe, and my wife who stuck with me, and my kids who learned to understand that their dad had something going on in his life that just wasn't right. We need to be thinking about this every day as we deal with recovery. We need to be thinking about this every day when we come in contact with individuals who need that support. You and I are the people who can provide that support. We can provide that support on a daily basis. We can provide that support in our everyday lives, so that when somebody faces that terrible day when they're going to go to the hospital for the first time, or they realize that this is really about as bad as their life is going to get, that you're there to help pick them up, like people were able to help pick me up and pick up many of the individuals that you are hearing from during this very important conference. Okay. I don't pretend that we can solve all the problems of the world, but every one of us can get out there and just do something just a little bit different than you did before. Reach out just a little bit differently than you did before to help provide the support. Right? I'll leave you with one message. I say to people, in the very first speech I gave in Rotterdam in 2003, I said, look to your left, look to your right. That person with mental illness could be you, could be the person to your right, it could be to the left. It turned out to be me. It could be you, it could be me. Let's make sure that we make this recovery process continue. I thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.